The stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewport, distant pinpricks of light against the dark void. The captain stood at the helm of the ISS Valiant, the last hope of humanity. His reflection in the glass revealed weary eyes and a clenched jaw, but there was no room for doubt now. Beyond the horizon of space, 1,000 alien warships closed in enough firepower to turn Earth into ashes. Status report, the captain barked, his voice cutting through the hum of machinery and distant alarms. Lieutenant Harper Reeves, her fingers flying across the holographic controls, replied without hesitation. Enemy fleet approaching at 300,000 kilometers and closing fast. ETA 8 minutes. The air thickened with tension. The crew of the Valiant, though seasoned, had never faced odds like this. Humanity's fleets had been decimated in the first wave of the Avarian invasion. Earth's colonies burned across the outer systems, and now the core worlds stood defenseless. The Valiant was all that remained. 1,000 ships. The captain gritted his teeth. The Avarian, with their insected frames and cold, unfeeling eyes, had underestimated humanity, but perhaps not this time. Shields at full capacity. Yes, sir. Primary and secondary arrays are holding steady. Fusion cores at maximum output. Harper confirmed, her voice steady despite the tension in her shoulders. Good weapon status. Rail guns charged. Plasma cannons primed. The Omega Lance is standing by, but we'll only get one shot with it. The captain nodded. The Omega Lance, the ship's experimental energy weapon, was humanity's last gamble. One shot, one chance to shatter the Avarian command ship, but even if they succeeded, 999 more warships would still remain. A low chime echoed through the bridge. Commander Patel, the ship's tactical officer, looked up from his console. Sir, the enemy fleet is deploying interceptors, thousands of them. They're trying to overwhelm us before the main fleet arrives. The captain's fists clenched. 1,000 warships weren't enough. They wanted to drown the Valiant in a swarm of fighters. He refused to let fear take hold. Brink point defense systems online. Load all missile tubes. Prepare the Gauss turrets for rapid fire suppression. We'll cut through their swarm no matter how many they throw at us. Aye, sir. Patel replied, his voice firm with determination. The distant hum of the ship's systems deepened as the Valiant powered up to full combat readiness. Red warning lights cast faint glows across the crew's faces. Every breath felt heavier, every heartbeat louder. Minutes ticked away. The swarm appeared on the tactical holo map, thousands of red blips converging on a single blue dot. The Valiant, the captain studied the screen, memorizing every vector and trajectory. Fear whispered at the edges of his mind, but he crushed it beneath the weight of duty. This wasn't just a battle, it was humanity's final stand. Helm, bring us to full speed, straight into the swarm. Harper glanced up sharply. Sir, you heard me. We break through their fighters, or we die trying. No retreat. Patel's eyes gleamed with determination. Aye, sir. The engines roared, pushing the Valiant forward like a spear of steel through the void. The alien interceptors closed in from all sides, wings of silver and black moving with terrifying precision. Open fire. Rail guns thundered, hurling slugs at hypersonic speeds. Plasma cannons blazed, tearing bright gashes through the darkness. Gauss turrets spat streams of tungsten rounds, shredding interceptors as fast as they appeared. Explosions blossomed across the void, scattering debris in all directions. The swarm pressed harder. Missiles streaked toward the Valiant, their warheads hungry for human blood. Point defense lasers slashed through space, detonating dozens before impact, but not all. The ship rocked as enemy fire struck the hull, tearing through armor and sending shockwaves through the decks. Sparks rained from overhead conduits. Smoke filled the air. Crew members clung to their stations as the Valiant pressed onward. Shields down to 50%. Harper shouted over the chaos, hold the line, push forward. The captain bellowed, gripping the rail beside the command chair. The ship's main cannons fired in synchronized bursts, punching holes through the densest waves of interceptors. Wreckage tumbled through space, but the swarm still thickened. Shields at 40%. The captain's heart pounded as he scanned the holomap. They were halfway through the swarm, but at this rate the ship wouldn't last. Then he saw it. A gap helm. Adjust course. Mark 275 down 15 degrees full burn. The ship veered sharply, engines blazing white hot. The sudden maneuver caught the swarm off guard. Hundreds of interceptors scrambled to adjust their trajectories. Too slow. The Valiant plowed through the gap, weapons hammering any ship that dared block the path. Shields at 20%. The captain didn't hesitate. Divert power from secondary systems, life support, gravity, everything. Keep the weapons and engines online. Aye, sir. Harper's fingers flew across the controls, overriding safety protocols. The artificial gravity vanished. Crew members floated from their seats, gripping rails and harnesses to stay in place. The air grew thinner as oxygen recycling systems shut down, but the ship's engines burned hotter, pushing faster, cutting through the swarm like a knife through flesh. Seconds dragged into eternity. Explosions painted the void in flashes of white and orange metal screeched as enemy fire scarred the hull. Then silence. We're through. Patel shouted disbelief and triumph in his voice. The captain exhaled his breath ragged in the thinning air, but there was no time to celebrate. Ahead the main fleet loomed, massive warships bristling with weapons waiting to finish what the swarm had begun, and at the center of it all the Avarian command ship, larger than a city, its dark hull gleaming with the light of distant stars. The captain's eyes narrowed. Prepare the Omega Lance. The hum of the ship's systems echoed through the air, louder now that the artificial gravity and life support had been cut. Sweat clung to the crew's faces as they clung to their stations, breaths shallow in the thinning atmosphere, but no one wavered. The Valiant had punched through the swarm, defying impossible odds. Now only the Avarian fleet stood between them and Earth's survival. Enemy fleet advancing, distance 100,000 kilometers and closing. Harper reported, her voice strained but steady. The captain's eyes locked onto the holographic display. The 1,000 enemy warships moved as one, a wall of steel and plasma engines blazing as they closed in for the kill. At their heart the Avarian command ship loomed like a dark leviathan, larger than anything humanity had ever faced. If the Omega Lance could strike that ship, the enemy fleet might crumble. If not, there would be no second shot. Bring the Omega Lance online, the captain ordered, his voice hard as iron. Commander Patel's fingers danced across the tactical console, charging Omega Lance capacitors at 30%, and rising. Estimated time to full charge 3 minutes. 3 minutes against a 1,000 ships. The captain's jaw clenched. Divert all remaining power to weapons and shields. Helm, take us straight at the command ship, maximum speed. Sir Harper glanced back, eyes wide with disbelief. You heard me. The captain's voice cut through the air like a blade. If we're going down, we're taking their commander with us. Aye, sir. The Valiant surged forward, engines roaring as they pushed the warship toward the heart of the enemy fleet. Plasma cannons and rail guns blazed, hammering the first line of alien vessels. Explosions bloomed like fire flowers against the void as Avarian ships buckled under the onslaught, but the enemy returned fire. Blinding streaks of plasma lanced through space, slamming into the Valiant's hull. The ship shuddered violently, armor melted and buckled, bulkheads groaned, and sparks erupted from shattered conduits. Smoke filled the air, mixing with the thinning oxygen. Shields at 5%. Harper's voice cracked with strain. Redirect all non-essential systems to shields. Everything we've got, the captain ordered. Life support's already offline. We've got nothing left to divert. Then we fight without shields. His voice thundered across the bridge. We make it count. A plasma blast struck the port side, ripping through the hull. The deck beneath the crew shuddered violently as consoles exploded in showers of sparks. The distant wail of emergency alarms filled the air. We've lost port side rail guns and missile launchers, Patel shouted, gripping the console to keep himself steady. Keep firing with what we have left. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewport, distant pinpricks of light against the dark void. The captain stood at the helm of the ISS Valiant, the last hope of humanity. His reflection in the glass showed weary eyes and a clenched jaw, but there was no room for doubt. Beyond the horizon 1,000 alien warships closed in, enough firepower to turn Earth to ashes. Status report, he barked, his voice cutting through the hum of machinery and distant alarms. Lieutenant Harper Reeves, her fingers flying across the holographic controls, replied, enemy fleet approaching at 300,000 kilometers, closing fast. ETA 8 minutes. The air thickened with tension. The crew, though seasoned, had never faced odds like this. Humanity's fleets had been destroyed in the first wave of the Avarian invasion. Earth's colonies burned. Now the core world stood defenseless. The Valiant was all that remained. 1,000 ships. The captain gritted his teeth. The Avarians, with their insected frames and cold, unfeeling eyes, had underestimated humanity, but perhaps not this time. Shields at full capacity, yes sir. Primary and secondary arrays holding steady, fusion cores at maximum output. Good. Weapon status, rail guns charged, plasma cannons primed. The Omega Lance is ready, but we only get one shot. The captain nodded. The Omega Lance was humanity's last gamble, one chance to destroy the enemy command ship, but even if they succeeded, 999 more warships remained. Commander Patel looked up from his console. Sir, the enemy fleet is deploying interceptors, thousands of them. They're trying to overwhelm us before their main fleet arrives. The captain's fists clenched. 1,000 warships weren't enough. They wanted to drown the Valiant in a swarm of fighters. Brink point defense systems online. Load all missile tubes. Prepare the Gauss turrets. For rapid fire suppression, we cut through their swarm no matter how many they send. Aye, sir, Patel replied, his voice steady. The distant hum of the ship's systems deepened as the Valiant powered up for battle. Red warning lights cast a glow across the crew's faces. Every breath felt heavier, every heartbeat louder. Minutes ticked away, the swarm appeared on the tactical display, thousands of red blips converging on a single blue dot, the Valiant. The captain studied the screen, fear whispered at the edges of his mind, but he crushed it beneath duty. This wasn't just a battle, it was humanity's final stand. Helm full speed straight into the swarm. Harper glanced up. Sir. You heard me, we break through or we die trying, no retreat. Aye, sir. The engines roared, pushing the Valiant forward like a spear into the void. The alien interceptors closed in from all sides, sleek wings of silver and black moving with terrifying precision. Open fire. Railguns thundered, plasma cannons blazed, Gauss turrets spat streams of tungsten rounds, shredding interceptors as fast as they appeared. Explosions lit the void, debris scattered in all directions. The swarm pressed harder, missiles streaked toward the Valiant warhead, seeking human blood. Point defense lasers slashed through space, detonating dozens, but not all. The ship rocked as enemy fire tore through armor, sending shockwaves through the decks. Sparks rained from overhead, smoke filled the air. Shields down to 50%, Harper shouted. Hold the line, push forward, the captain bellowed, gripping the rail. The ship's main cannons fired in bursts, punching holes through the densest waves of interceptors. Wreckage tumbled through space, but the swarm still thickened. Shields at 40%, the captain's heart pounded as he scanned the holomap. They were halfway through, but at this rate the ship wouldn't last. Then he saw it, a gap. Helm adjust course 275 down, 15 degrees full burn. The ship veered sharply, engines blazing white hot. The sudden maneuver caught the swarm off guard. Hundreds of interceptors scrambled to adjust. Too slow, the Valiant plowed through weapons, hammering anything in its path. Shields at 20%. The captain didn't hesitate. Divert power from secondary systems, life support, gravity, everything. Keep weapons and engines online. Aye, sir. Harper's fingers flew across the controls. Gravity vanished. Crew members floated, gripping rails. The air grew thinner, but the engines burned hotter, pushing faster, cutting through the swarm. Seconds dragged into eternity. Explosions flashed across the void. Metal screeched, then silence. We're through, Patel shouted, disbelief and triumph in his voice. The captain exhaled, but ahead the main fleet loomed, massive warships bristling with weapons waiting to finish them. At the center, the Avarian command ship, larger than a city. Prepare the Omega Lance. The hum of the ship's systems echoed louder. Without gravity and life support, sweat clung to the crew's faces, breaths shallow in the thinning air, but no one wavered. The Valiant had punched through now, only the Avarian fleet stood in the way. Enemy fleet advancing, distance 100,000 kilometers closing, Harper reported. The captain's eyes locked on the 1,000 enemy warships moving as one. If the Omega Lance struck the command ship, the enemy might crumble. If not, there was no second shot. Bring the Omega Lance online. Patel's fingers moved across the controls, charging capacitors at 30% full charge in 3 minutes. Divert all power to weapons and shields. Helm, take us straight at the command ship, maximum speed. Sir. Harper looked back. You heard me. If we're going down, we're taking their commander with us. Aye, sir. The Valiant surged forward, engines roaring, plasma cannons and rail guns hammered the first line of alien vessels. Explosions bloomed like fire in the void, but the enemy returned fire. Plasma lanced through space, slamming into the Valiant's hull. The ship shuddered violently, armor melted, bulkheads groaned. Shields at 5%, Harper's voice strained. Redirect all power to shields, everything. Life support's already offline, we have nothing left. Then we fight without shields, we make it count. A plasma blast struck the port side, tearing through the hull. The deck shuttered, panels exploded, flames erupted. Another hull breach vented debris and bodies into the void. Port side decks are gone, casualties across multiple sections, Harper shouted. The captain's heart hammered, but his gaze stayed on the tactical display, hundreds of red markers converging. Keep firing, use everything we have. Rail guns pounded, plasma cannons spat, missiles locked onto the weakest points, detonating with thunderous force. The captain barely had time to throw himself to the deck before the shockwaves slammed into the Valiant, sending it spinning helplessly through space. Fire, noise, chaos, then darkness. Silence thick, suffocating. The void swallowed all sound. Smoke clung to the air, acrid, searing his throat. Dim emergency lights flickered, broken shadows on twisted metal, and scorched consoles. Sparks hissed from ruptured panels, the only sound. The captain groaned, pushing himself up, limbs aching, blood dripped from a gash, warm, sticky. His ears rang, muting the faint coughs and groans of the surviving crew scattered across the deck. Status report, his voice hoarse. He cleared his throat, tried again, louder. Harper emerged through the haze, uniform torn, face smeared with soot but eyes burning with determination. Main power offline, emergency reserves, hull compromised, starboard decks lost, engines gone, life support failing, venting oxygen. The captain's stomach twisted. Casualty sensors are down, no full count. Patel didn't make it. The captain closed his eyes. Patel's voice still echoed, but there was no time for mourning. The Omega Lance, did it hit? Harper hesitated, afraid to hope. Yes, sir, the enemy command ship is gone, completely destroyed. A slow exhale, the weight of countless lives pressing on his chest, the shot they needed, but as his eyes lifted, hope shrank. The Avarian fleet still surrounded them, regrouping fast, closing in, weapons ready. Harper's voice cut through. Incoming transmission from the enemy fleet. Put it through. The holographic screen flickered, then sharpened. The Avarian commander loomed, exoskeletal frame black as obsidian, multifaceted eyes gleaming, cold mandibles parted, speaking in perfect Terran standard. Human vessel, your resistance is admirable but futile. Your flagship is broken. Surrender, and I may grant a swift death. Continue, and Earth will burn. The captain's fists curled around, the weight of every soul aboard, every fallen colony, every family on Earth waiting for a miracle. The Avarians wanted him to break. He stepped forward, voice raw but unyielding. This war isn't over. The Avarian's mandibles clicked in amusement. Your courage is wasted, human. No one will remember you. The captain's gaze burned through the display. They'll remember the day one ship defied 1,000. He cut the transmission. Silence fell. The crew stared, battered but unbowed. Harper's voice low, sir, we can't win this. Weapons offline, shields gone, the ship won't take another hit. The captain knew she was right. Logic screamed to surrender, but surrender meant Earth's annihilation. He looked at his crew. They deserved more than a last stand, they deserved a reason. Open a channel. Harper hesitated but obeyed. The comms system buzzed weakly. The captain inhaled, voice steel and fire. This is the ISS Valiant, the last warship of humanity. You think we'll break, but hear me, we are humanity. We do not yield, we do not break. If you want Earth, come and take it, but you'll pay for every inch in blood. The ISS Valiant was barely holding together. Plasma blasts from the enemy fleet tore through its hull, throwing crew members from their stations. Fire and smoke filled the air, consoles exploded, and the ship shuddered under the relentless assault. Oxygen was running out, and the ship's structure was collapsing. Shields are gone, hull integrity is critical, Harper shouted, her voice desperate. The captain barely heard her over the pounding in his ears. Every breath burned, every movement was agony, but he refused to surrender. Incoming transmission from the enemy fleet, Harper called out. The screen flickered to life, revealing the alien commander once more. Its black exoskeleton gleamed, and its cold, emotionless eyes stared through the screen. Human vessel, your resistance is meaningless. Your ship is failing. Surrender now, and we may spare your world. The captain stepped forward, blood and sweat streaking his face. This battle isn't over until the last human breath leaves this ship, he growled. The alien commander's mandibles twitched, almost amused. Your courage is wasted, it said. Surrender. The captain clenched his fists. His crew was watching. They needed him to make a choice. He turned to Harper. The Omega Lance, is there any way to fire it again? Harper's eyes widened in shock. Sir, the capacitors are drained. We can't. What if we reroute power directly from the fusion core? The captain pressed. Harper hesitated, then swallowed hard. Yes, but it will overload the core. We won't survive the shot. Silence fell over the bridge. The crew knew what this meant. The captain took a deep breath. If we take down their fleet, Earth might have a chance. We might not survive, but they'll know humanity never bowed. Harper's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Aye, sir. She worked quickly, diverting all remaining power to the Omega Lance. Alarms blared. The ship's hull groaned under the strain. Power at 50%, 70%, 90%, Harper called out, her voice shaking. Another plasma blast ripped through the ship, tearing away entire sections, but the Valiant pressed on. 100%, the Omega Lance is ready. The captain gripped the console. Target the center of their fleet. Fire. A blinding beam of white-hot energy erupted from the Valiant, slicing through the enemy warships. The beam tore through their fleet like a storm, causing explosions to ripple outward. One by one their ships detonated, the shockwaves scattering the survivors. But inside the Valiant, the overloaded fusion core reached its limit. Fires raged, metal twisted and screamed, and systems failed one by one. The captain barely had time to see the enemy fleet being wiped out before everything went dark. Pain, smoke, silence. Somewhere in the darkness a voice called to him, Captain, can you hear me? His eyes fluttered open. Harper was kneeling beside him, her face pale and streaked with soot. Stay with me, sir, she pleaded. The captain forced himself upright, ignoring the pain status. Harper swallowed hard. Main power is gone, fusion core is destroyed, engines are offline, life support is barely holding, 10 minutes of air left, most of the crew didn't make it. The captain closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of those lost pressing down on him, and the enemy. She looked at the flickering tactical screen. Over 200 enemy ships were destroyed instantly. The explosion took out dozens more. The survivors are regrouping outside weapons range. They're waiting to see if we're still a threat. The captain forced himself to his feet, swaying slightly. Pain was everywhere, but he pushed through it. If he could still feel pain, that meant the fight wasn't over. We still have missiles in the aft launchers, he asked. Harper nodded hesitantly. Yes, but without engines we can't aim them, and the targeting systems are down. We can't lock onto the enemy ships. The captain stared at the flickering display, mind racing. The Valiant was broken. Their weapons were useless without guidance. The enemy still had ships. And Earth was still in danger. There had to be a way. The ISS Valiant was falling apart. Plasma blasts tore through the ship, throwing crew members from their stations. Fire and smoke filled the air. Consoles exploded. The ship shook with every hit. Oxygen was running out. The hull was breaking. Shields are gone. Hull integrity is critical, Harper shouted. The captain could barely hear her. Every breath burned, every movement hurt, but he refused to surrender. Incoming transmission from the enemy fleet, Harper called. The screen flickered, revealing the alien commander. Its black exoskeleton gleamed. Its cold, emotionless eyes stared through the screen. Human vessel, your resistance is meaningless. Your ship is failing. Surrender, and we may spare your world. The captain stepped forward, blood and sweat streaking his face. This battle isn't over until the last human breath leaves this ship, he growled. The alien commander's mandibles twitched, almost amused. Your courage is wasted. Surrender. The captain clenched his fist. His crew was watching. They needed him to choose. He turned to Harper. The Omega Lance, can we fire it again? Harper's eyes widened. Sir, the capacitors are drained. We can't. What if we reroute power from the fusion core? She hesitated, then swallowed hard. Yes, but it will overload the core. We won't survive the shot. Silence filled the bridge. The crew understood what this meant. The captain took a deep breath. If we take down their fleet, Earth might have a chance. We might not survive, but they'll know humanity never bowed. Harper's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Aye, sir. She worked fast, diverting all power to the Omega Lance. Alarms blared. The hull groaned. Power at 50%, 70%, 90%. Harper called. Another plasma blast ripped through the ship, tearing away sections. 100%. The Omega Lance is ready. The captain gripped the console. Target the center of their fleet. Fire. A blinding beam of energy erupted from the Valiant. It sliced through the enemy fleet, tearing their ships apart. Explosions rippled outward. One by one their warships detonated. The survivors scattered. Inside the Valiant, the overloaded fusion core reached its limit. Fires raged. Metal twisted systems failed. The captain barely saw the enemy fleet burning before everything went dark. Pain, smoke, silence. A voice called to him. Captain, can you hear me? His eyes fluttered open. Harper was kneeling beside him, her face pale. Stay with me, sir, she pleaded. The captain forced himself upright. Status. Harper swallowed. Main power is gone. Fusion core is destroyed. Engines are offline. Life support is failing. Most of the crew didn't make it. He closed his eyes. The weight of their loss pressed down on him. And the enemy? She looked at the screen. Over 200 enemy ships were destroyed instantly. The explosion took out dozens more. The survivors are regrouping outside weapons range. The captain gritted his teeth. The Valiant was crippled. Their weapons were useless. The enemy still had ships. Earth was still in danger. His fingers gripped the console as his mind raced. The Omega Lance had bought Earth a chance, but 100 enemy ships could still burn the planet. They needed more time. Then the answer came, cold, sharp. Harper, he said slowly. What's the status of the reactor core containment field? She blinked. It's unstable. The overload damaged the magnetic field. If we had power, we might stabilize it, but... And if we don't? She hesitated. Without containment, the core will collapse. If enough energy builds up, it'll trigger a chain reaction, but the core is already burned out. There's not enough energy left to... She stopped. Realization hit her. Horror flashed across her face. Unless. The captain met her gaze. Unless we overload the remaining fusion cells, force the reaction manually. Her breath caught. Sir, that would detonate the entire ship. A blast big enough to take out anything within 100,000 kilometers. Silence. The captain turned to the viewport outside. The alien ships waited like vultures. If we detonate here, we'll take out half their remaining fleet. Earth might stand a chance against the rest. Harper stepped closer. There's still a chance we could get rescued. They'd never reach us in time, the captain said. And even if they did, Earth would still fall. Harper swallowed hard. Her shoulders trembled, but she met his gaze. Then I'm staying, she said firmly. You'll need help. No, his voice softened. You're taking the crew and evacuating. Her eyes went wide. Sir, This isn't a debate, Lieutenant. His voice hardened. Get to the escape pods, get as many people out as you can. Someone needs to tell Earth what happened. Someone needs to remember why we fought. Harper's breath itched, but she nodded sharply. There was nothing more to say. As she turned to relay the evacuation order, the captain placed a hand on her shoulder. She paused. Tell them, he said softly, that one ship stood against 1,000 and didn't break. She swallowed hard, blinking back tears, then she was gone. The captain stood alone on the shattered bridge. Systems failed around him. The air grew colder. He entered the override codes. Warning lights flashed red. He ignored them. The fusion cells surged with unstable energy, feeding directly into the broken core. The hull vibrated. Outside, the alien fleet stirred. The captain straightened shoulders, squared breath steady. As the fusion core reached critical mass, he whispered into the void. For Earth. The void answered in fire. Blinding light erupted. The ISS Valiant became a sun. The explosion tore through space. The enemy fleet never stood a chance. Ships disintegrated instantly. The shockwave ripped through their ranks. Fire consumed them. The brilliance faded. Silence returned. Far away, Earth's defense stations detected the explosion. Confusion spread. Then the data came in. The alien fleet was gone. Across Earth, people watched in stunned silence. For days, humanity had fought on the brink of extinction. Now hope burned anew. Days later, a single escape pod drifted through space. A rescue ship found it. Inside, Harper Reeves sat staring at the stars. Silent tears ran down her face, but there was no sorrow, only the weight of sacrifice. The airlock hissed open. A crewman stepped inside. His expression shifted from duty to shock. Survivors. They helped her to her feet. One of them hesitated. Where's your captain? Harper paused. Her breath hitched. He stayed behind, she said. The crewman frowned. Why? To finish the fight. Silence, then a slow, solemn nod. Harper glanced at the void where the Valiant had stood. One ship against 1,000, she whispered. And we won. The story of the ISS Valiant spread across Earth. People spoke of the lone warship that defied impossible odds. Some said the captain's last words haunted the enemy. Others claimed the explosion was so bright even distant colonies saw it. One truth remained. Humanity had faced extinction and survived. The captain's name would never be forgotten. And the stars would remember the day one ship defied 1,000.